Hello again, everybody. I want to preface this with the fact that I am going to be talking about some really serious stuff. Um, if you guys watched my video about using the word trigger warning incorrectly and how much I hate that, you will understand when I say that this is a major trigger warning. I'm going to talk about abuse. Um, and if this is something that you are currently dealing with and you don't think um, you can really take having someone else talk about it in as large a detail as I can personally handle, then skip this video because it's not going to be fun. Um, a little while ago, and I actually have to find the actual thing here. If you give me just 1 second, because I want to actually get this right because this is a really big deal, and I want to get all the facts straight. Um, apparently, back, I think it was on the 10th is when it actually happened. Matthew Santoro, who is a very popular YouTuber, accidentally, and we're not sure yet if it was like a computer glitch where YouTube made the private video public or if he accidentally clicked the button. All we know is that unintentionally, a video he made, I believe it was back in like September, went public, and a lot of people saw it. And the video itself is him talking about the abuse um, that he endured from a former significant other. He never actually names this person, and a lot of speculation and crap has gone on, and there's been interviews and stuff like that with other people, and it's turned into something really ugly. However, Boogie2988, one of the people that I sincerely admire as a content creator and as a person in general, created a response to it where he talks about the experiences that he's had uh, with abuse. And this hit really close to home for me. Um, I listening to what happened to Boogie, and then I actually went back and I watched because Matthew actually went and re-uploaded the video, or maybe not re-uploaded, maybe just made it public again because of the positive response he got from it, from the fact that it was helping people. Uh, and so I went and I watched his video of it, and it floored me. Um, for a number of reasons. Probably the thing that terrified me the most about it was the fact that a lot of the things that he described were things that I personally had experienced and hadn't quite realized how much they had affected me. And I guess it was just the idea. I thought, as weird as this may sound, I thought I was the only one, to be blunt. And apparently, this is a very common occurrence with males in particular, though abuse victims in general, it's relatively common. Um, is one of the reasons that they won't come forward about it is the fact that they feel alone. They feel that people won't believe them. They feel that somehow it was their fault. Um, so I this is really hard to talk about, guys. This is something that I've actually never spoken to anybody about this. You guys are quite literally the first people I've ever told any of this stuff to. So we'll see how it goes. Um, I wanted to start off by just talking about some statistics from the National Domestic Violence Hotline, specifically about male victims of domestic violence. Um, the stigma attached to domestic violence in general is it is a male perpetuated crime. Males abuse females, and that's just how it works. However, there are millions of male victims of domestic violence, and not only emotional and psychological violence, but physical violence as well. Boogie talks about horrible, horrible things that his mother did to him, that one of his significant others did to him. Matthew goes through another just kind of laundry list of the things that were done to him by his significant other. And yeah, a lot of guys won't talk about this for a number of reasons. The stigma attached to the idea that domestic violence can only be against women um, makes it seem disingenuous for a man to talk about it. And then there are, thought processes like, well, she's so much smaller than you. There's no way that she could abuse you, or she's so much weaker than you are. There's no way that she could abuse you. That was your own fault for not doing anything about it. And women deal with very similar thought processes as well. The idea of them thinking that it was their fault, that they somehow caused it, and things. It's a very common thing among abuse victims in general. It's part of the abusee mentality. But with the recent push of like the consent campaigns, what is consent, and the talk of rape culture and things like that, women that are victims of abuse have had a little bit, I'm not saying it's easy by any stretch of the word, but they've had a little bit easier time now getting people to at least believe them. And that simply hasn't been happening for male victims. The statistics that the National Domestic Violence Hotline talks about, 1 in 7 men age 18 and older in the U.S. have been victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime, which is a lot. I think the same statistics in women is, I want to say it's 1 in 4. So women are more likely. However, and the other thing that's interesting about that is it's 1 in 7 have been victims of severe physical violence. This doesn't count non-severe physical violence, whether it's just I don't know how they define severe physical violence, but due to the fact that they define it that way specifically, to me would indicate that there's probably a lot more. 1 in 10 men have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner, which again is less on average than what women experience, but is still an alarmingly high number. They said in 2013, 13% of documented contacts to the hotline identified themselves as male victims. And then they make the emphasis that there is very likely a significantly higher portion of men that never report the violence due to stereotypes and socialization ideals that have kind of been ingrained in us. The idea that men really aren't supposed to talk about their feelings and stuff like that. Um, so it's a really big deal. Abuse in general is a horrible, horrible thing. I've talked about it before. I actually made a video that talks specifically about how to identify um, uh, emotional abuse, which is incredibly damaging and one of the most difficult to prove, and leaves lasting scars. Um, so, um, talk about my experiences. Um, my first girl I dated, I've mentioned before, was a pathological liar. She was never diagnosed, or at least not while I was dating her. Um, but the symptoms were there and very, very obvious to me because of how closely uh, we interacted. She she told me stories about. She would lie about things that she had no reason to lie about. She made up stories um, rather convincingly off the top of her head and then would stick to them like her life depended on it. She told me one of her friends once stole her writing like diary and then submitted it as their own for a writing class. Um, the two people, the girl she was talking about was one of my friends, um, who before I started dating this girl had never really had any interaction with her whatsoever. I'm not even sure if they went to the same middle school where my ex claimed this happened. But she came up with a very convincing story. She told me how she toured South America with a singing group when she was younger, even though she couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. Um, so yeah, suffice it to say, she was a pathological liar, and it's one of the reasons why I have such a large problem with people lying and half truths and stuff like that. Because for almost 2 years of my life, I was completely controlled by them. Um, I I lost almost every one of my friends. I was forced to push them out of my life because she didn't want me to spend any time with them. Um, uh, she After we'd been dating for a few months, I was a virgin at the time and had very strong convictions about uh, premarital and any extramarital sex. I was very adamant about the fact that I didn't want to, and she pressured me over and over and over again until, for fear of her leaving me alone, um, I I relented. Um, and for literally the entirety of our relationship, I hated having sex, um, because I just felt so horrible about it and just disgusting the entire time. Um, there were there are other things that happened that I am not to the point where I can really talk about them um, in great detail, um, but uh, it's not an enjoyable time, um, and it has affected every relationship, both romantic and non-romantic, I've had for the rest of my life. Um, for the longest time, because of the lies that she told, um, I was accused of doing things to her that I never did. Um, I was actually confronted by a group of people whom I cared about significantly and who I thought were my friends that said some very, very mean things to me and talked about stuff that I'd never done to her, and threatened to hurt me if I ever did them again. Um, and in my mental state at that time, I believed them. I believed her. I believed that I had done these horrible things to her that I never did. Um, and I felt horrible. Um, I was convinced that um, I was convinced that I was a rapist. I was convinced that um, I was abusing her, that I was using her, and I lost a lot of the respect that um, these people had for me because I didn't fight the allegations I thought they were true. Um, and Yeah, it wasn't until years later that I started realizing that the version of events that I had been believing for years wasn't true. And it was a combination of my own guilt and her lies that made me convinced that that was what actually happened. And yeah. Um, so the reason I'm talking about this and the reason I'm kind of bringing it to the forefront uh, is the same reason that Boogie did it and the same reason that Matthew Ree uploaded the video. Um, Abuse happens to everybody. There is no gender. Uh, there is no mental type, and anyone can be abused. And the worst thing in the world for someone that has been abused is for them to feel that they're the only one, that it was somehow their fault, that they were the ones that were actually doing the abusing and not the other way around. Um, and It's not true. And there are other people. There are a ton of people that are coming out of woodwork right now that are being able to talk about this. And one of the purposes of this channel is to um, talk about to get the stigmas away from things like mental health and and or mental health and abuse and things like that. There's all these stigmas around it that prevent us from talking about it, that prevent us from being able to admit what's actually happening, and that stop us from fixing this. This is a serious issue, um, and we need to fix it. We need to talk about this. We need to admit that there is this massive, horrible, disgusting problem, and we need to find better ways to deal with it. We need to find better ways to help the victims of abuse so that they can get to the point where they can move on with their lives. We need to find better ways to deal with the abusers, because a lot of times the reason they are abusers is because when they were younger, they were abused. It's a cycle of abuse that keeps perpetuating over and over and over again. If the only thing that we do is punish these people for admittedly doing horrible things to people, we're not helping them and we're not helping anybody else. We need to not only help the victims of the abuse, we need to come up with a better way to help fix the abusers. Because as much as they do horrible things and ruin lives, um, 9 times out of 10, they are victims as well. So anyway, that's all for me. If If you personally have been a victim of abuse, I'm going to put the National Domestic Hotline, Domestic Violence Hotline phone number in the description below. Please call them. They can help. There are many, many other services that will help people that have been victims of abuse. Um, and yeah, it's all for me. Um, I have no idea if I'm doing a Road to LA stream tonight or not. This has messed me up majorly, but I hope that talking about this can help remove the stigma and get other people talking about it as well. All right. Bye-bye.